after what critics described as a strategic setback for Donald Trump in the Iran conflict. Speculation is now growing over whether Washington could shift its focus toward Cuba in an attempt to reassert American power closer to home. Some reports and analysts are now raising questions over whether the US military could eventually face a Cuba armed with advanced drone capabilities allegedly linked to Iranian technology and asymmetric warfare tactics. The growing military rhetoric surrounding Havana has also triggered comparisons to another Operation Epic Fury, this time unfolding just 90 miles away from the United States mainland in the Caribbean region. As tensions rise, some observers are even warning about the possibility of a new-style missile crisis scenario emerging if Russia decides to step in politically, militarily, or strategically to support Cuba against Washington. As the Iran conflict drags into a costly stalemate, reports now suggest that Washington is increasingly considering the possibility of military action against Cuba as tensions rapidly escalate closer to America's own doorstep. According to Politico, President Donald Trump has reportedly grown frustrated that the United States pressure campaign, sanctions, and economic blockade tactics have so far failed to force major concessions from Cuba's leadership. One report further claimed that the Trump administration is now taking the option of military action against Cuba far more seriously than before, especially after expectations of quick strategic victories linked to Iran reportedly failed to materialize. Will Trump attack Cuba? The initial idea on Cuba was that the leadership was weak and that the combination of stepped-up sanctions enforcement, really an oil blockade, and clear US military wins in Venezuela and Iran would scare the Cubans into making a deal. Now Iran has gone sideways, and the Cubans are proving much tougher than originally thought. So now military action is on the table in a way that it wasn't before. Reports claim that Washington is now weighing a wide spectrum of military options against Cuba, ranging from limited precision airstrikes designed to pressure Havana all the way to the possibility of a full-scale ground invasion. According to multiple reports, the US military's Southern Command has already begun preparing potential operational plans related to Cuba as tensions between Washington and Havana continue to escalate sharply. The United States has also reportedly moved closer toward a possible indictment of former Cuban leader Raul Castro, signaling a dramatic escalation in Washington's confrontation with Cuba's ruling establishment. At the same time, the US imposed sanctions on 11 Cuban officials along with the country's main intelligence agency as part of a broader campaign aimed at increasing pressure on Havana's leadership. The Trump administration specifically targeted Cuba's communications minister and several senior military figures, accusing them of helping sustain what Washington described as an increasingly authoritarian system. US officials have repeatedly described Cuba's government as corrupt and ineffective, while openly pushing for political change and a possible restructuring of the country's leadership model. Through aggressive fuel-related sanctions threats, the Trump administration has effectively imposed what critics describe as a de facto blockade on Cuba, severely restricting the island's access to energy supplies. According to reports, the widening American pressure campaign has already contributed to major power outages and deepening economic strain across Cuba as shortages continue to worsen. Cuba's energy crisis reportedly became even more severe after Washington threatened sanctions against countries and companies accused of continuing to supply fuel shipments to the island nation.
Is Cuba going to turn to us and make a deal?
I think so. Look, I've been hearing about Cuba since I'm a little boy. They've been saying, what's going on with Cuba? And I think we'll be turning it. Marco's been very effective.
And they're taking the aid now.
Yeah, they're taking the aid. They want aid. They need help.
Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel warned that any direct military action by the United States against Cuba would trigger what he described as a bloodbath, with devastating consequences for the entire region. Diaz-Canel also declared that any form of American aggression against Cuba would lead to incalculable consequences, signaling that Havana is preparing for the possibility of a far more dangerous confrontation with Washington. Amid the rising tensions, Axios reported that Cuba has allegedly acquired hundreds of military drones, raising fresh concerns about how the island may be preparing for potential hostilities with the United States. As tensions with Tehran continue to smolder, President Trump is confronting a startling new security concern only about 90 miles from the US coastline. According to US intelligence assessments, Havana has quietly accumulated a fleet of more than 300 attack drones sourced from Russia and Iran. Classified reporting obtained and shared with Axios paints a worrying picture in which Cuban officials reportedly discuss scenarios for using those drones to strike U.S. military. The reported targets are said to include Guantanamo Bay, U.S. naval vessels operating in the region, and even areas around Key West. U.S. officials have described Havana's drone procurement and planning as a growing threat, stressing that while there is no confirmed imminent plot to attack American targets, the trajectory of Cuba's capabilities is increasingly concerning. American intelligence analysts worry that Iranian advisors now operating in Cuba could export battlefield tactics honed during Iran's recent conflicts, teaching Cuban forces how to use swarms, standoff strikes, and asymmetric approaches against U.S. interests. U.S. intelligence says Cuba's acquisition began in 2023 and involved attack drones of varying capabilities. Those systems are reported to have been supplied by Russia and Iran and are now stored at a network of strategically chosen island sites around Cuba. U.S. officials say that within the past month Havana has quietly requested additional drones and supporting equipment from Moscow. Intelligence intercepts indicate Cuban officers are carefully studying Iran's playbook, how Tehran has endured pressure and fought back against U.S. strikes. It's notable that Russia and China have long operated advanced signals intelligence facilities on Cuban soil, infrastructure that could be used to support drone operations. One report even claims as many as 5,000 Cuban soldiers served with Russian forces in Ukraine, where they would have observed and possibly participated in modern drone warfare. Washington officials believe those veterans returned from a Ukrainian front with concrete, hard-won lessons about Iranian and Russian tactics for integrating drones into combined operations. U.S. concerns spiked after Iran's large-scale drone campaigns against U.S. and Israeli targets since February 28. Campaigns that showcased how low-cost, massed unmanned systems can inflict damage and complicate defense efforts. Iranian drones have been used to strike U.S. bases and other assets and to pressure shipping in and around the Strait of Hormuz. American planners now fear those same low-cost, hard-to-stop tactics could be copied and adapted in the Caribbean, creating new vulnerability for U.S. ships, bases, and coastal communities. The Axios report comes a week after open flight tracking data and military observers tracked U.S. intelligence flights near Cuba since early February. Reports say at least 25 reconnaissance missions by manned aircraft and drones have flown close to Havana and Santiago in recent months, a tempo higher than usual peacetime patrols. Many of those sorties have reportedly come within roughly 40 miles of Cuba's coastline, a range well suited to vacuum up detailed signals, radar, and communications intelligence. The aircraft mix has included P-8A Poseidon patrol jets, RC-135V Rivet Joint Electronic Intelligence planes and high-altitude MQ-4C Triton spy drones, all designed for persistent surveillance. Analysts note similar reconnaissance patterns appeared before U.S. actions in Venezuela and Iran under Trump, when intelligence flights ramped up ahead of sanctions escalations and limited strikes. In Venezuela, recon flights surged after U.S. forces hit a vessel allegedly linked to Nicolas Maduro's networks, a reminder that spy missions can be both a precursor and a follow-up to pressure moves. In the Iran theater, a broader mix of U.S. and Israeli aircraft surveilled coasts and key sites before joint operations, suggesting Washington likes to build a thick intelligence picture before acting. Now, with the same families of aircraft turning up off Cuba, many are asking whether this is just cautious mapping of a crisis, or the early echo of a familiar escalation pattern aimed at another U.S. adversary.